that we will track. Let me move away from earnings and move into something macro. You know that India has been characterized by high inflation, in fact high food inflation over the last many months, and probably is a problem which will continue to persist. At the base of that is high protein inflation, which is something that the central bank has been talking about as well. CRISIL has come out with a report which seems to suggest that that problem will persist. Joining me to talk about the findings, Mr. D.K. Joshi, Principal Economist at CRISIL. Good morning, sir. Thanks so much for coming in. I just want to get the base takeaway from your report. You looking backwards and sort of looking at the numbers which suggest the problem behind the kind of inflationary pressures we are facing today.
Well, yeah, actually protein inflation has been much higher than general food inflation, and even today it has come down a bit, but still it contributes about 50% to food inflation. So protein inflation has been one of the big problems. I think what has happened in the last couple of years is that protein consumption or the spend on proteins has gone up very significantly, although the consumption of protein per capita hasn't increased that much. And reason for increasing spend is that the prices of protein items have, particularly milk, meat, eggs and fish, have gone up very, very sharply. And that links up to the rising affordability, particularly in rural areas. What we have looked at is particularly the rural consumption, which accounts for almost 2/3 of the protein consumption, animal protein consumption in India. So I think in a scenario where you had the supply not rising well enough, but the pressure on inflation emerging, particularly because affordability had risen, people could pay more for proteins, and actually it's about 17 million households entered into the protein consuming category between 2004, 5 and 9, 10. So there has been a significant number of people who are consuming proteins, but had the inflation not been so high in protein, probably they would have extra income to spend elsewhere, and even on proteins.
But looking ahead, I mean, is there sort of an indication of what is the pace at which this protein consumption is growing, and what is the pace at which supply is growing? So, what the mismatch could look like in the years to come as well?
Well, I think supply has been more or less stagnant. I think we haven't extrapolated that, but clearly I think the point that we are trying to make is that the affordability or the demand has been rising much sharply because the wages have risen. People have spent a lot of money on purchasing proteins, but their actual consumption hasn't risen much, and actual consumption can only rise when you have increasing supplies. So clearly I think the mismatch of demand and supply has resulted in protein inflation, and our estimate is that about, I think we have given some ranges for the demand shortfall in various categories of protein. I think between 15 to 20% shortfall in supply exists today as per our calculations.
But sir, as the prices of these items rise, I mean, if the pace of the rise in the, the prices is higher than, say, wage increase, hikes, etc., shouldn't the consumption automatically start to flatten out? Shouldn't the demand automatically start to flatten out eventually?
Well, I think the consumption in terms of grams of protein consumed, I think that hasn't increased. But I think the overall, if you look at the rural wage increases, which is the casual labor or even the unskilled labor, I think that has been 25 to 30% per annum increase for the last 3 to 4 years. And I think that increase is much higher than the inflation in protein. So clearly, I think the affordability has raised ahead of the prices, and that's putting further pressure on prices.
So, sir, the key takeaway from a macro standpoint is that until you at a micro level attack this shortfall in protein commodities in particular, the food inflation problem is probably not going to come down for a while.
Well, doesn't look like. I think if you look ahead, if the rural wages keep rising the way they have in the last 3 to 4 years, then I think you are entering a situation where the protein inflation will remain persistently high. But if rural wages come off, I mean, for instance, let's assume that the pace of increase of rural wages slows down, then I think you will be in a scenario where protein prices remain high and people are not able to afford them. So that's also a welfare decreasing measure. I mean, the protein consumption in any case is low in India and has had high nutritional value. So I think it's very, very critical to increase the supply. I think that is the key takeaway because I don't think the rural wages, the way they have risen in the past 3 to 4 years, I think that can be sustained going ahead because the economy itself has slowed down now.
All right, let's see how it plays out. Interesting dynamics. Thanks so much, Ms. Joshi. Always appreciate your analysis and your thoughts here on the channel. That's the micro problem behind the macro problem of persistent inflation here in India. That's all the time we have on Fundamentals. Thanks for watching. News continues.